The rain in Seoul came without warning. Zara Adeyemi had learned that much in the 48 hours since she'd landed at Incheon with 2 suitcases, a broken heart, and a contract that promised to change everything. The rain in Lagos announced itself days in advance. The air thickening, the sky bruising, the whole city holding its breath. But here it simply arrived. One moment the glass tower of the Hanul Grand Hotel shimmered dry against the night skyline. The next, sheets of cold water were hammering down as though the sky had been waiting for her specifically. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of room 1408 in a silk robe that barely skimmed her thighs, a glass of red wine cradled in both hands, watching Seoul drown. She was supposed to be celebrating. Senior Creative Director Obihan Global, the largest luxury brand consultancy in East Asia. 3 years of building campaigns from Lagos that had finally caught the right eye. The contract was real. The corner office with the Han River view was real. The relocation allowance that had let her leave behind an apartment full of another man's ghost was real. What was not real, what was already unraveling at the edges, was the rest of it. Her phone buzzed on the glass desk. She didn't reach for it. She already knew what it would say. Kwame had been calling since yesterday, alternating between apologies and accusations the way he always did when he realized she was serious this time. 28 days ago she had come home early from a client dinner and found evidence of a life he'd been living in parallel. Not just a night, a life. 2 years of a life, complete with a woman who knew how he took his coffee and a weekend apartment in Lekki Phase 1. Zara had not cried. Not once. She'd packed quietly while he slept, left her key on the kitchen counter, and booked a flight to Seoul for a job interview she'd been delaying for months. Now she was here, and she still hadn't cried. She was considering whether that meant she was strong or simply broken when the door to her suite opened. She spun around so fast the wine sloshed. A man stepped through the door, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black, moving with the quiet certainty of someone who had never once in his life second-guessed a decision. His eyes swept the room in a single professional arc before landing on her. They were dark eyes, sharp as cut glass, and for one suspended second, they took her in completely. Then he stopped. "This is not room 1418. His voice was low, accented English precise as a blade. Zara stared at him. "No, it is not." Something moved across his expression. Not quite embarrassment, more like the controlled adjustment of a man recalibrating. He looked at the key card in his hand, then at the gold numbers on her open door, then back at her. "I apologize." He stepped back. "I was given the wrong room number." He should have left. She should have let him. Instead, something about the surreal intimacy of the moment. The rain, the wine, the silk robe, and this stranger filling her doorframe at 11:30 on a Tuesday night made her say, "Wrong number, wrong room. Story of my life lately." He paused, looked at her again. This time not a security sweep, something slower, more considered. "Are you all right?" he asked. No one had asked her that in 28 days. Zara felt something tighten in her chest, right behind her sternum, where all the things she hadn't cried about had apparently been quietly collecting. She took a slow breath, took a sip of wine, looked at this stranger in her doorway, this too handsome, too serious man with his wrong room number and his careful eyes, and said, "Come in, tell me your name, and I'll tell you why I'm standing in a foreign country in the rain drinking alone." He was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed the threshold and closed the door behind him. "Park Seo-jun," he said. "Zara." She moved to the seating area, curled into the corner of the sofa, and nodded at the chair across from her. "Sit down, Park Seo-jun. You look like a man who's been standing at attention all day." A flicker of something in his eyes. Not quite amusement. Close to it. He sat. He was the head of executive security for Obihan Global. She found this out at midnight, when the wine was half finished and the rain had not relented and they had moved from polite strangers to something harder to categorize. He told her with the same economy he seemed to apply to everything: minimal words, maximum information. Head of executive security. 3 years with the company. Former ROK Special Forces. Seoul-born, Busan raised. "And you were coming to 1418 because," she said. "The new senior creative director was supposed to arrive tonight. I was conducting a standard security sweep of her suite before she checked in." Zara went very still. "Her," she said. Her, he confirmed. They looked at each other. I checked in 6 hours early, she said. Couldn't sleep on the plane. The front desk should have updated the system. The front desk, Zara said carefully, may have been distracted by my very large suitcases. The corner of his mouth moved. She was almost certain it was a smile, except it arrived and disappeared so quickly she couldn't be sure. Then we will have an interesting working relationship, Ms. Zara. Just Zara. She tucked her feet beneath her. And what exactly does executive security entail? You follow me around. I oversee your security protocols, assess threats, ensure you move safely through souls, environments. A slight pause on the word environments. The company's leadership has received threats in recent months. Standard precaution. Threats? She repeated. What kind of threats? The kind I'm paid to ensure never become your problem. She studied him over the rim of her glass. He sat with the stillness of someone who had learned long ago that movement cost you things. Not rigid, that would have been tension. This was something different, contained, like a river that had decided, once, exactly how wide it was going to be and had not changed its mind since. You're very good at not answering questions, she said. I'm very good at answering only the ones that matter. And which questions matter? The ones about your safety. Everything else. A brief pause, his eyes holding hers. Is none of my business. Zara smiled slowly. And yet here you are, in my room, at midnight. A mistake I should correct. He stood. Park Seo-jun. He stopped. Thank you, she said softly, for sitting down. I didn't realize how much I needed someone to just sit down. He looked at her for a long moment. The rain made the windows glow. In this light, with that robe and those eyes and whatever it was she was carrying beneath her composure, she was the most striking woman he had ever seen in his life. He had been in this job for 3 years. He had protected diplomats and CEOs and heirs to generational fortunes. He had stood in rooms with beautiful women and felt absolutely nothing. He felt something now. He filed it under inadvisable. Get some sleep, he said. I'll have the actual room 1418 ready for you by morning. You can stay or move, your choice. I'll stay. She lifted her glass in a small salute. Good night, wrong room. Good night, Ms. Adeyemi. He left. She sat with the wine and the rain and the strange warmth in her chest that had no business being there. She still hadn't cried. She wasn't sure she needed to anymore. In the weeks that followed, Zara learned what it meant to be watched over by a man who was exceptionally good at making you forget he was there. Seo-jun operated from a step behind and to her left, close enough to intervene, far enough that she rarely noticed. He appeared at the beginning of her day, silent, composed, holding a door or steering her away from a crowd with a hand that barely grazed her shoulder, and disappeared at its end like a shadow the sun had taken back. He was not warm. He was not cold. He was precise, and in his precision there was a kind of care she hadn't known how to name until now. The threats, she learned in pieces, were real. Obihan's founding chairman, a man named Dong-hyun, had died 6 months ago under circumstances the company's official statement described as natural and the company's unofficial hallways described as anything but. His son, On Jae-hoon, had stepped into the role with the aggressive elegance of someone who had been waiting a long time. There were factions. There was money at stake. There were people who did not want the company's international division, which Zara now led, to succeed. She absorbed this the way she absorbed most information. Efficiently, without visible alarm, with her mind already 3 steps ahead. Why me? She asked Seo-jun one evening, standing at her office window as Seoul lit itself up below. Of all the people to bring in for this role, you were the most qualified, or the most expendable. Pause. Why would you say that? Because I have no connections in Seoul. No family here. No one who would ask uncomfortable questions. She turned from the window. It's a useful quality in a target. Seo-jun looked at her steadily. You have me asking questions. She searched his face. He was unreadable in the way of men who had trained themselves to be, but there were things she had learned to catch. The slight tightening at his jaw, the fractional change in how he held himself when something mattered. He was holding himself like something mattered. Is that professional or personal? She asked. It's both, he said. Which is a problem. The air in the room changed. Why is it a problem? Because my job is to keep you safe. And the things that make me want to keep you safe are going past the professional line. That makes me a liability to you. Zara crossed the room slowly until she was close enough to see the tension in his throat. Or it makes you the one person in this building who is actually on my side. Zara. Her name in his mouth, low and careful, like he was deciding something. Park Seo-jun, she said back, in the same tone. He exhaled once, controlled. Then he stepped back. I'll have the car ready at 7 tomorrow, he said. The Gangnam presentation. He left. She pressed one hand flat against the window glass, cold against her palm, and understood that the slow burning thing in her chest had a name now. She was not going to be sensible about this. The Gangnam presentation became the Gangnam dinner, became the night that rearranged everything. It had started well. Zara had walked into that boardroom and dismantled 4 months of a competitor's strategy in 40 minutes using nothing but data, instinct, and the particular composure she'd developed in rooms that underestimated her. She was the only woman, the only non-Korean, the youngest person at that table by a decade. She had won. Jae-hoon had taken her to dinner at a restaurant that didn't have a sign on the door. The kind of place where the menu was recited, not presented. He was charming in the way of men who had learned that charm was a tool, precise, strategic, deployed exactly when needed. You're extraordinary, he told her over wagyu that dissolved on the tongue. I want you to know I see that. Thank you, she said. She kept her eyes on her food. I also want you to know that my interest in your success is personal. She looked up. Jae-hoon was handsome, polished. He smiled at her with the practiced ease of a man who had rarely been told no. I appreciate the confidence, she said carefully. I'd like to show you more of Seoul, beyond the office. I'm sure I'll find my way. With a guide who knows the city. He reached across the table and laid his hand over hers. With me. From behind her left shoulder, she felt a shift in the air. She didn't have to look to know. Seo-jun had been standing at his post near the restaurant entrance all evening, still as architecture. He was no longer still. I'll think about it, she said to Jae-hoon, and removed her hand gently but with finality. In the car afterward, she sat in the back and Seo-jun drove and neither of them spoke for 6 minutes. She counted. He's your employer, Seo-jun said finally. I'm aware. I have no right to. You don't. Silence. And yet, Zara said quietly. And yet, his hands tightened fractionally on the wheel. Zara, don't apologize for it. I wasn't going to apologize. I was going to, he stopped. What? I was going to ask you to be careful. Not about him professionally. About a pause. About letting anyone here convince you that you owe them something. She looked at his profile in the dim passing lights of the Han River Bridge. The jaw, the scar below his left ear she'd been wondering about for weeks. The careful set of his mouth. Is that the bodyguard talking? She asked. A long beat. No, he said. She turned back to her window. Seoul moved past in streams of gold and red. She thought about Kwame. About how easy it had been to confuse attention for care, proximity for love. About the 2 years she'd spent making herself smaller in rooms where he stood. She was not going to do that again. But this felt different. This felt like the opposite of small. She found out about Jisoo on a Thursday. It wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation. No tearful confession. She simply arrived at the office early to find Seo-jun standing outside the building in the gray morning light. Phone pressed to his ear, completely still except for one hand gripping the back of his neck. The one small tell she had identified as his version of barely holding it together. She waited. When he ended the call and turned to find her watching, something moved through his face. The equivalent in a man like him of being caught mid-breakdown. Don't say you're fine, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, the 7th of every month. What happens on the 7th? My daughter was born on the 7th. She's 4 now. She lives with her mother in Busan. I see her. A breath. Controlled. Not enough. Zara was very quiet. I was deployed when she was born, he said, in the voice of someone reciting facts to stay above them. Her mother, Suyun. She didn't leave because of anything dramatic. She left because I was never there. Because when I was there, I was still somewhere else. Because, he stopped. I don't know how to be. Another stop. Domestic. Safe. The kind of man who comes home at the same time every day. Do you love her? Your daughter. Completely. And her mother? A long pause. I loved the version of us I thought we'd become. But Suyun deserves a man who actually shows up. I wasn't that. He looked at Zara steadily. I'm telling you this because you should know what I am. Not a story. Not a mystery. A man who is better at protecting people than being present with them. Why are you telling me this now? Because, he said, and his voice dropped half a register. I am finding it very difficult to maintain appropriate distance from you, and you deserve to know what you would be dealing with. The morning air was cold between them. Seo Jun, she said it softly, watching his face. Thank you for telling me the truth. It isn't a good truth. Most real ones aren't. She stepped past him toward the building entrance. At the door she paused. For what it's worth, the fact that you told me means you're better at showing up than you think. She went inside. He stood on the pavement for a moment longer, the morning cold on his face, and felt something shift in the precise, contained architecture of himself. Something he hadn't felt in 4 years. The terrifying, specific feeling of beginning. The threat materialized on a Friday evening when the office was half empty and the city was softening into weekend. Zara was alone in the archive room pulling files from a presentation when the lights went out. Not a flicker, a total surgical cut. The emergency lighting hadn't come on, which meant it wasn't a power failure, which meant it was deliberate. She pressed herself against the shelving and did not move and did not make a sound. A door opened somewhere below. In her earpiece, the one she'd complained about for 3 weeks before accepting as non-negotiable. She heard Seo Jun's voice, quiet, controlled, like he was discussing weather. Zara, don't speak. 3 taps if you're unharmed. She tapped her chest 3 times. Stay where you are. I'm coming. The sounds that followed lasted 40 seconds. She counted those 2. Something heavy against a wall. A brief struggle, economical and brutal. Silence. Then the emergency lighting came on. Then Seo Jun was in the doorway. He crossed the room in 3 strides. His hands went to her face before she could register the movement. Both palms cupping her jaw, tilting her face toward the light. His eyes moving over her with rapid clinical intensity. You're not hurt. I'm not hurt, she confirmed. He exhaled once. His forehead dropped to hers. Just for a second, this man who maintained perfect distance, this professional, this contained and careful person. He dropped his forehead to hers and breathed. Seo Jun, she whispered. I know, he said. I know. He straightened. His hands left her face. The professional mask came back down, but slowly, imperfectly, like a coat that no longer quite fit. 2 men. They're contained. I need to get you out of the building. Who sent them? His jaw tightened. Seo Jun. Who sent them? I have a strong suspicion, he said carefully, that tonight's event is connected to the On Dong-hyun investigation. There is evidence that his death was not natural. And there is evidence that whoever ensured it wasn't natural is concerned about the international division attracting external scrutiny. Evidence you've been sitting on. Evidence I've been building a case around, carefully, while using me as bait. No. The word was immediate, sharp, entirely without the controlled smoothness of everything else he said. No. Never. I would never, he stopped, took a breath. When I discovered the connection between your appointment and the internal power conflict, I escalated to 3 separate authorities and was told it was under control. I disagreed. That is why I have been. That is why I have not left your side. She looked at him in the emergency light. The cut on his cheekbone, fresh and already swelling. The way he was looking at her. Not like a bodyguard, not like a professional, like a man who had just found something precious on the floor of a burning building and was not letting go. Take me somewhere safe, she said. Yes. And then tell me everything. Yes. And then, she paused. We'll talk about the rest. Something came into his face that she hadn't seen there before. Something undefended. Yes, he said, for the 3rd time, like a promise. The safe house was in Mapo, a 4th-floor apartment with clean lines and bare walls, and a kitchen that was too well stocked for a place no one was supposed to live in. You stay here sometimes, Zara said, turning slowly in the small living room. When an operation requires it. She ran her finger along the bookshelf. Novels in Korean and English and one in Igbo that stopped her completely. She turned to look at him. I acquired it, he said, with the careful weight of a man telling the truth and hoping it doesn't terrify the other person. After Lagos. I was seconded to a protection detail 3 years ago for a West African energy summit. I spent 6 days in Lagos. I have thought about it, about that particular energy, that particular way of inhabiting space since. That's a very complicated way of saying you liked Lagos. I liked Lagos, he confirmed, and the simplicity of it, after everything, made her laugh. She hadn't laughed since she landed. He looked at her when she laughed the way she imagined people looked at things they'd stopped believing in when those things suddenly appeared. She stopped laughing and looked back at him. Tell me everything, she said. The case, the ons, all of it. He told her. It took 2 hours. Tea going cold between them on the low table. Soul quiet outside the window. Donghyun had been building a case against a weapons laundering network that used legitimate luxury brand supply chains as cover. His son, Jae-hoon, had inherited not just the company but a choice. Expose the network or use it. He had chosen to use it. The threats against the international division were designed to keep Western attention away. Zara's appointment, visible, high-profile, exactly the kind of hire that brought press and scrutiny, had accelerated the timeline. He invited me to dinner, she said quietly, to assess whether I knew anything. Or to keep you close. Seo-jun's voice was even but his hands had gone still on the table. Yes. And you've been building parallel evidence to take to the NIS. Financial records, communication trails, testimony from 2 employees who will provide statements. He looked at her steadily. I did not tell you because I didn't want you to act differently around him. I needed you to behave naturally. You used my naturalness. Yes. That's not entirely different from what he did. The quiet between them had edges. No, he said finally, and the word cost him something. It isn't, and I am sorry. Not for protecting you, never for that, but for not trusting you with the full picture. He met her eyes. You deserved the full picture. Zara sat with that for a moment. You know what's interesting, she said slowly. Kwame, the man I left in Lagos, he never once said those words. Not in 2 years. Not for anything. She looked at Seo-jun. You said them in the first week. He was watching her with that undefended look again. What happened with Kwame, she said, is why I'm here, why I took a job in a foreign city, why I was standing at that window in the rain drinking wine alone on a Tuesday. She paused. And I keep trying to decide if running away was brave or just running. You didn't run, he said. You walked toward something. That's different. Toward what? A long pause. Toward here, he said simply. As far as I can see. She was the one who moved first. She would remember that later in the weeks and months that followed, when people asked her how it had started. She had moved first. She had crossed the low table and sat beside him on the sofa and turned toward him and said, I'm not going to keep pretending I don't want to touch you. He had gone very still. Zara, I know about the complications. I know about the job and the professional line and Jisoo and Soohyun and all of it. She held his gaze. And I'm telling you that I'm making an informed decision with full information, which is all I've ever wanted to be able to do. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached up and touched her face with one hand. The same gesture as the archive room, but different now, entirely different, nothing clinical about it. Just his hand against her cheek. His thumb tracing the line of her jaw like he was learning something by heart. I have been thinking about this, he said quietly, since a woman in a silk robe opened a door that was supposed to be empty and said something that made me want to stay. Then stay, she said. He kissed her the way she'd suspected he would do everything. Deliberately, with his full attention, like there was nothing else in the world that required him. His hand moved from her face to the back of her neck and the other arm pulled her in and Zara felt the careful architecture of him begin, finally, to open. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, felt his heartbeat, fast and honest, giving him away. You're not as composed as you pretend, she murmured against his mouth. Only with you, he said. Only ever with you. What followed was slow and certain and entirely without performance. He touched her like every moment of it mattered. Like there was no destination, only the journey of learning her. The curve of her shoulder, the softness below her ear, the small sound she made when he finally, deliberately, took his time. She had been so careful for so long about what she allowed herself to want. She had edited herself, shrunk herself, made herself the sensible version to keep the peace. She had forgotten what it felt like to be seen without editing. Seojun saw her. All of her. The ambition and the wound and the laughter and the loneliness she'd been carrying since before she even landed in Seoul. He didn't try to fix any of it. He just held it with her. Afterward, she lay against his chest in the quiet of the Mapo apartment, while Seoul did its soft nighttime breathing outside, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Still, not the stillness of holding yourself together. The stillness of not having to. Tell me something about Busan, she said. She felt him smile against her hair. The sea there is different from the sea in Lagos, he said. Colder, grayer. But in the morning, before the fishing boats go out, there's a particular kind of light. He paused. I'd like to show you. Then show me, she said. The arrest of An Jae-hoon happened on a Wednesday morning, 10 days later, with the elegant precision of a case that had been built in careful silence over months. Zara was not in the building when it happened. Seojun had ensured that. She was in a cafe in Yeonam-dong with a flat white and her laptop and a video call with the Lagos team she was building, the one she'd envisioned for 3 years, the one that would connect West African design talent with East Asian markets, the real reason she'd come, the work that had survived everything else. Her phone lit up with a message from Seojun. It's done. She set the phone down, looked out the window at the street, at the morning Seoul going about its business, all of it indifferent to her small quiet relief. It's done. She picked the phone back up and typed, "Are you all right?" The response came after a moment. "I'm outside." She looked up, through the cafe window, across the street, leaning against a wall with his hands in his jacket pockets. Looking directly at her was Park Seo-jun. Off duty or something like it, without the professional set. Just a man. She gathered her things and went outside. They stood on the pavement in the morning and looked at each other. "It's over," she said. "The criminal investigation is over. The company restructuring will take time. There will be hearings. You'll be asked to testify about the targeting of your position." "I know. I'll testify." "You're not afraid?" "I have excellent security." A pause. "Or I did." Something shifted in his face. "Your contract runs another 11 months. And after that?" A beat. "After that," he said carefully, "I thought I might take some time off. See Lagos." Zara looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Not dramatically, just her hand in his, simple and decided. "Lagos in December is extraordinary," she said. "Tell me about it." "Walk with me," she said. "And I will." They walked. She told him about the year-end energy in Lagos, the harmattan dust and the market colors and the way the whole city celebrated itself. He told her about Jisoo, about the last visit, about the small serious child who had learned 3 words in English and used them to devastating effect. She told him about her mother's jollof rice and how no one outside Nigeria would ever be able to properly replicate it, and she would fight anyone who claimed otherwise. He laughed. Really laughed. Not the contained fractional smile she had spent weeks cataloging. An actual, unguarded laugh that changed his whole face and made 2 passing students turn to look. She stopped walking to watch it. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. I'm very glad I checked in early." He looked at her. The scar below his left ear caught the morning light. His eyes were warm in a way she was beginning to suspect no one else got to see. "The wrong room," he said. "The right person," she answered. 6 months later, the international division of Obihan Global reported its highest quarterly performance in the company's 40-year history. The Lagos Creative Hub launched in November with 12 local designers, 3 of whom had been working from makeshift studios and a dream. The campaign they produced ran in 7 countries and was described by 3 separate publications as the most significant creative work to emerge from West Africa in a decade. Zara stood on the stage at the Seoul launch event in a red dress she'd had made for exactly this moment, by a tailor in Balogun Market who had known her since she was 12, and she spoke about the thing she had always believed, that the world grew larger when more people got to say what beauty looked like. In the back of the room, near the exit, old habit, Park Seo-jun stood with his hands folded in front of him and watched her. He was, technically, no longer her bodyguard. His secondment to Obihan had ended in September. He was now operating independently, consulting, building something legitimate from the skills that had always been used in service of someone else. The NIS had been quietly appreciative. The work was less dangerous and somehow more meaningful. He watched Zara at the podium and thought, with the clarity of a man who had spent a long time being precise about what mattered. This was it. This specific woman in this specific red dress, meaning every word she was saying. This was the thing worth showing up for. After the applause, after the photographs, after the speeches and the champagne and the conversations that had to happen in rooms like this, she found him by the exit. "How was that?" she asked. "Perfect," he said. "You're biased." "Entirely," he agreed. She looked at him. This serious, careful, quietly transformed man who had walked into her room by mistake and somehow never quite left it. "Jisu's school break starts next week," she said. "Yes. You mentioned she wants to see the ocean. Busan has an excellent ocean. So does Lagos." Zara tilted her head. "I spoke to my mother." He went very still in the way she loved, the specific stillness of something maturing enormously. "She's making jollof rice," Zara said. "And she wants to meet the man who kept her daughter safe. And she wants to meet the little girl." She paused. "If you want to go." Seojun looked at her for a long moment. Then he took her face in his hands. Both palms, the gesture that had started everything in an archive room in the dark. And he kissed her slowly and completely in front of the entire room, because he had spent enough years of his life being contained. When he lifted his head, she was smiling. "We're going to Lagos," he said. "We're going to Lagos," she confirmed. "I should warn you," he said. "I have been practicing the Igbo phrase you taught me. My pronunciation is apparently terrible," she finished. "Genuinely terrible. Your mother will correct me." "My mother will adore you," Zara said. "She likes men who show up." Something moved through his eyes. Old pain, old absence, and something newer and stronger moving past it. "Then she'll have no complaints," he said. Zara took his hand. Around them, Seoul celebrated. Outside, the Han River ran its constant silver course through the city, indifferent and perpetual. She thought about the woman who had stood at a rainy window 40 weeks ago, holding wine and grief and the particular loneliness of someone who had loved badly and forgiven herself for it and was trying, carefully, to figure out what came next. That woman had left a door open, literally, metaphorically, impractically, and something extraordinary had walked through it. Not a rescue. Something better than that. A beginning. The kind that arrives without warning, like rain in Seoul, and changes the shape of everything. If you made it to the end of the story, you already know real love doesn't arrive when you're ready. It arrives when you're at the window in the rain, tired and honest, finally done pretending everything is fine. Drop a black heart in the comments if Zara's strength resonated with you. And tell us, was there a moment you knew Seojun was the one? We want to hear it. Subscribe to Afro Seoul TV for more stories that live in the space between Seoul and Lagos, between holding on and letting go, between the wrong room and exactly the right place. Because sometimes, the best things in your life start with a mistake. Until next time, never let anyone make you invisible. Black Heart Afro Seoul TV.